on this edition of the Self-Publishing Show.
The most that I experienced at that point was like a mildly encouraging rejection letter. So to go from that to suddenly, in the span of about a year, the book is published, there's a movie, I'm like walking the red carpet next to John Malkovich, and it's like, what is happening in my life right now?
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers, no more barriers, no one standing between you and your readers. Do you want to make a living from your writing? Join indie bestseller Mark Dawson and first-time author James Blatch as they shine a light on the secrets of self-publishing success. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Yes, hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Show for another Friday feast of indie news and interviews. My name is James Blatch.
And my name is Mark Dawson.
I was peak partridge in that introduction then. It took me back to my days on the radio. Welcome to a Friday feast. I think I've got better at presenting, doing this podcast than I did in 12 years at the BBC because of the relentless nature. I mean, I've done three interviews, I think, this week. We do this at least once a week in these recordings, and there's no substitute. In fact, I've said this before, talking to people about doing lives, Facebook Lives, and getting used to it. There's no magic solution, just do them. Just keep doing them and you'll end up relaxed and hopefully enjoyable companies is what you're trying to be. You're not trying to show off or you're trying to be just a companion.
A companion. Yeah, James is seeking... James, 60, seeking...
60? Rude. Well, that was my birthday last week. I am not 60. Right. Let's welcome our new Patreon supporters before we do anything else. We're enormously grateful to those of you who sign up through patreon.com/self-publishing show because you enable this show to happen. And that means a lot to Mark and I. So Jim Pugh from Georgia, United States, A.O. Monk from South Carolina in the US, Angela Sinclair from Texas in the US, from China, I.B. Miller from Zhejiang, Justin Bell from New Hampshire, Miriam Kay, and also got to be the winner of the best name in the list is Buster Birch from Orpington, near Bromley in Kent in the United Kingdom. Buster Birch. I wonder what genre Buster Birch writes in.
I don't know. We should ask him.
I'm thinking young adult aimed at young boys, kind of Just William type. Jenkins, was it Jenkins? What was that name?
Here we go.
Another
rambling. What?
Now there's, I was looking at my son reads the Tom Gates books, which are sort of illustrated, and they are novels as such, as sort of young person's novels, but they're heavily illustrated. So every sentence has little drawings in between. And they're being brilliant for that because young boys are quite difficult to get them reading in the same way that girls do. And this week, with a slightly heavy heart as well, I stumbled across Tommy Donovan's books, Scream Street. So I've bought him those as well. In fact, it's been delivered today. So I want him to have a look at those to try and get him to read in. And we should mention Tommy, who's a listener to the podcast and a friend of ours, and somebody who has a brilliant writer who writes in this tough area, actually getting kids to read, and was just dealt the worst possible hand in terms of cancer. He's been blogging about it very movingly and very openly. It's been an esophagus cancer, and he's had some terrible news this week. But there's in fact, we should say that he's basically been told now by the doctors that it's weeks
or months. Yeah. So I saw that the day before we were recording this, I think it was. And Tommy is asking. He has a Just Giving page. He's quite reticent to ask for help, but he has asked for help for his family, and also he's been taking some CBD, which I think is a cannabis derived medicine, which is quite hard to get in the UK. So, and it's also very expensive. So he's sent people over to a Just Giving page, which I don't know if you've got it to hand.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up actually, and I will get it out there.
We'll certainly mention it in a minute, and we'll also put it in the show notes. But we posted in the SPF community, and I saw it posted in 20 Books as well. And I think he's asked for 25,000. I think he was halfway there yesterday. So definitely go and click that link and go over. And if you have a few spare dollars or a few spare pounds or whichever currency you use, then I think Tommy would be really grateful if you could contribute to that page.
So you can go to tommyvcancer.com, which is Tommy's blog, and you can read about his latest episode and diagnosis. And to donate to Tommy's campaign, it is a Just Giving page. It's justgiving.com/crowdfunding/Tommy V Cancer. Tommy is spelled with a Y, TOMMY V Cancer. And I don't know what to say. I mean, part of me just wants to hope that there's some mistake has been made and that he's going to defy the odds. But Tommy has been incredibly brave in the way he's dealt with this. And he talks very movingly about telling his two sons. And it's very difficult to even think about the situation that he's in. So anything we can do to help Tommy, and he's already thinking about his legacy and his family, and that's we've certainly put our hands in our pockets. We would urge you, if everyone gave, as you say, £5 or $5, we have a big community and a lot of listeners to the podcast would make a massive difference to this life, this family's life, and who've been blighted by cancer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Right, let's move on. So we've got a good interview this week coming up in a moment, which is about having a massive debut, about having a book that got turned into a big Hollywood film, and how you follow that up and some of the challenges, the unique challenges maybe that brings up. But before then, we're going to talk about an experience you're having at the moment. You're not quite ready to give us results yet, but you can give us the idea of getting into it, which is translation. So you started to take the idea more seriously of German translations for your book.
That's right. Yes. So I've mentioned this before. I spoke at an Amazon Academy event in Berlin a couple of years ago, and after the event, I spoke to some writers who were doing quite well, including one guy who was writing erotica and was making, I think, 6 figures a year through selling that. And I started to look into the German market a bit, specifically with regards to Amazon. And it's probably the third biggest Amazon marketplace for books after .com and .co.uk in terms of installed base and all of that kind of stuff. So, and it's one of those situations where it's kind of, there is demand there, but it looks like it isn't swamped in any way compared to the other two markets. So I've got lots of content, obviously. 3 of my Milton books have been translated by a traditional publisher in Germany. Haven't really done anything special. So I doubt I'd do any more deals that way. I'd probably do it myself. But to kind of give myself a test to see how I would be able to do with that, I took my Beatrix Rose, the 3 books in the main Beatrix Rose series, and looked to get those translated. And it's been an interesting experience in that I hadn't done it before, and I was a bit naive. So I knew I had to find a translator, and I don't speak a lick of German, which has been a bit of a problem. But I asked some traditional, some editors who work in the trad industry for recommendations for translators I could go to. The first one I tried was frankly a bit nuts. I discovered after we were kind of going into the talking about the contract, because obviously there needs to be a contract for this. They're assigning rights to a new literary work to me, lots and lots of complicated stuff.
Just clarify, that's a new literary work.
Yeah, well, it's kind of based off my book, but the translator produces a new work. So there's a new copyright in that work, which needs to be assigned to my company in exchange for payment. So I drafted a contract. It wasn't, it was fairly standard. And the first translator was almost offended that some of the things, I just think she didn't understand what the language meant, but she was like, some of the things she just reacted very badly. And I knew at that point, there was no point in continuing, because if that was going to be the first experience was one that I had to kind of try and calm her down, that I wasn't insulting her with what the contract required, a fairly vanilla contract. I obviously didn't want to do that later on as we were getting into the actual translation. So I moved on from her, eventually found a guy called Rainer Schmidt, who has worked on the Stieg Larsson books. So he has a great track record. And Rainer started working on the Beatrix books and translated all 3 of them over 6 or 7 months. And that was when the fun started. So Rainer was very professional. He sent me the translations, and I don't speak German, so I can't proofread them. And I realized, okay, these are new works. Rainer will have made mistakes, just like I make mistakes. There will be typos. There will be things that need to be tightened up. I can't do that job. Apart from the fact that I'm too busy, I also don't speak the language. So lots of impediments there. So I approached a couple of a very early fan of my books who actually translated one of the Black Mile for into German 6 years ago, probably. And she took a look at it, and then I realized I needed another layer of professionalism on top of that. So I found an editor who works in German editor, and she then worked on the translations. She and Raina had a correspondence, and just in the same way that I'd have a correspondence with my copy editor when I'm working on an English language book. And it was a long process. It was quite frustrating, expensive. So about 15 to 16,000 euros at this point. So not something that anyone would be able to do. And they're speculative as well. I don't know how many I'll sell. And they went live yesterday, and I sold 7 of the first one. So I'm still, miles and miles in the red. And now I'm getting into the, setting up advertising accounts, working out how to do Amazon ads in Germany. So that's with an Advantage account. One of the difficulties, as I'm discovering fresh difficulties all the time, all those registration pages are in German. So I've been running them through Google Chrome, translating them, which is pretty good, working out what I need to do. Luckily, I've got a good contact now in the Amazon advertising marketplace over there who's helping me with some bits and bobs. So there will be some campaigns starting, but it's been difficult. But we'll see. The potential upside, the rewards, I think, are quite significant. And hopefully, in a few months' time, I'll be able to come back and say I've made that investment back, and now we're in profit. But we'll see.
Yeah, well, that's proof's in the pudding, isn't it? We always say there's no point in doing this stuff for your own benefit or fun. So we do need to know in a few months' time that you're selling books in Germany. And it's a frustrating thing. We speak different languages. We live in different time zones. It would be great if the world sorted all that out. My book is military history set in the Cold War, and Germany is a great market for that, as is the Netherlands, actually. It's a country like Britain full of plane spotters and geeks about the military, for obvious reasons, perhaps. But it's a bit of a non-starter for me with a single book, which, it's not going to be viable unless it happens to be take off and be Booker Prize nominated, which is, let's face it, unlikely. So you're in your position where you've got a very healthy UK turnover. Even you are finding this quite a big upfront investment, quite a lot of investment of time. And as it stands at the moment, no proof of commercial viability.
No, I mean, we'll see. So, I've got lots of different levers I can pull. So, Facebook ads into Germany, I'll be running those. Of course, I don't speak German, so I need to get the copy. I'll draft them, and even things like the giveaways So, I'm using all the tactics I'd use for UK stuff. So, we have a giveaway at the end of the book to get you remember I give away a Milton psychological profile that's worked quite well. So I've done one for Beatrix, written by the German intelligence agency.
Brilliant.
So it was fun to write. So they are reporting on a British agent, but it's in German. So someone in the community actually a guy called Tom offered to translate that for me. So we've now got a German version with German DSB logos on it, and so all of that kind of stuff. But again, that all needs to be translated, and I can't do that. So I'm kind of relying on the generosity of people who like my stuff and are happy to help me out. But it's challenging. That is
an asset that you've got. You've got a big list of people, and on that list are going to be some German speakers who are going to be very happy to help you out.
I'm very lucky. So I haven't kind of utilized my mailing list yet. This is just people I've met on my Facebook page and in the Mark Dawson Facebook groups, and also in SPF as well. And I've had some help from people in SPF. So it's I know that's fortunate, and not everyone has access to that kind of pool of people and resources.
Well, you'll find some German readers who'll be advanced readers for you, I'm sure, on your list.
Yeah, I could do. I've probably got 6 now on Facebook. I did a post on Facebook, so if anyone is German, likes reading German books, would you like to look at these? And I've got a few. So we'll see. But it just, I'm kind of thinking about this. My brother said to me at Christmas, because I turned over, as I've said, over $1 million last year, and he said this must be the only business with $1 million turnover where there is one employee. and that is it. I don't employ anybody. When I've got contractors, and Alexandra does some virtual assisting for me. Stu does my covers. Stuart Grant works on my Facebook page, but these are not employees, and they're very much part time at best.
And you're not the only one.
No, I know. But the more I think about it, the more it's like I'm so busy at the moment. I'm really tired. I'm pretty much exhausted.
You're thinking about taking somebody on full time.
Yeah, I'd like to, but I don't know. They've I think I would want them to be in this office with me.
I'd hate that. I'd hate that.
Well, yeah, I don't. Yeah, I've got two rooms here, so I mean, I could very easily do that, but I could do. I don't know. I'm not sure. It's just one of those things that a lot of the stuff that we do as authors is, I'd have to give people access to an Amazon account. You can't at the moment. Amazon, I know Amazon listens to this podcast. One thing I'd love is to be able to grant people access on a limited basis. So if for Facebook ads, you have admins, you have advertisers, analysts. It would be great to have like an analyst level so they could look at the data, but they couldn't change the bank account, for example.
Well, you can do that with Infusionsoft. There's a very layered level of security you grant users. You do that with Xero as well. My accounting software is 4 or 5 levels.
Loads of software will allow different user roles. But at the moment,
slightly reluctant to think of Amazon making further IT under the bonnet changes because it's a big system, and every time they make a change, it does throw up issues as well. So.
This would be minor. I don't think this would be a fairly simple thing for them to do. So I would love to see that. It would just make it so much easier to, I could have someone in Germany join the team to run that for me.
Yes.
We'll see. I mean, I think at some point I'll have to accept that I can't do it.
You will receive emails as a result of mentioning that on this podcast. So you'll get a shortlist handed to you. Okay, look, we're going to talk to a guy called Isaac Marion now. He had a first novel turned into a big Hollywood film called Warm Bodies, and he struggled a bit. I was very honest about this. Struggled a little bit about finding a way of sustaining his career after that. He's a good writer, no question about that, but there's something to do with the way you are typecast a little bit in genres and so on that he's dealing with at the moment, and it's been very interesting talking to him about following up that big start. I think we're going to listen to the interview, then maybe Mark will catch up with your Hollywood situation after this, but let's hear from Isaac first of all.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Isaac, I think probably a good place to start would be for you to give us the elevator pitch of who Isaac Marion is.
Well, my name is Isaac Marion. I grew up in Washington in the U.S., mostly in and around Seattle. I started writing when I was a kid, basically, and started getting serious about it in my early teens. Wrote a couple terrible fantasy epics, and then got a little more serious and wrote something kind of grounded, and then spent a few years writing short stories, and then did Warm Bodies, and that was my first published book, and had a very abrupt whirlwind thing happen to me with that one, where it kind of came out of nowhere, and people from throughout various industries got interested, and suddenly there was a movie and an agent, and all this stuff started happening very abruptly.
So Warm Bodies was your first published work?
It was, except for technically my first published work was a comedic review of peanut butter corn puffs that was published in McSweeney's, of all places. Is technically my first credit, but it was not exactly a major work.
No. Okay. Well, I mean, what an introduction to a creative lifestyle, to have a huge hit straight away. And people will be familiar, I'm sure, with the book, and many people have been to see the film. So what was that like? Just describe that moment. How did it start? So presumably this was traditionally published, Warm Bodies.
It was. And eventually, I actually started self-publishing it. Kind of. I hesitate to really call that self-publishing, because my general MO for all those years of writing books before Warm Bodies was kind of I would finish it and then immediately print out a few hundred copies and just start put them up for sale on my blog or friends and family and just whoever wanted to buy one. This was back before there really was any infrastructure for self-publishing. It was pretty much like vanity presses and do it yourself in your local print shop, which is what I was doing. But I did that for, my first 3 books, and then did it for Warm Bodies, even though there was kind of an inkling that something serious might be happening. I didn't want to wait for it, so I just went right into it. I think I printed 500 copies and just sold them off my website, basically, which was just a blog. And so I technically started there, and then it blew up wide from that point, and then has kind of bizarrely come back full circle.
Yeah. So now you're looking at, we'll move on to where you are now, because I know self-publishing is definitely something you're doing now. So you got ahead, you printed these books, you sold them out of the boot of your virtual car on your website, and then how did you said that there was some interest? You had a feeling that there were people circling at that point, but how did it transform itself into a published book around the world and a major film?
Yeah, it was kind of this very drawn out, tiny step-by-step process from the original idea for Warm Bodies, which I started as a short story. It was just, 5-page little vignette. And somebody found that on my blog, and this person was sort of she considered herself like an online talent scout. She wasn't really working actively in the industry, but she kind of knew people here and there. And so she called me up out of nowhere and basically said, like, I think you got a lot of potential, but like, let me know when you write something that's a sellable work, not a 5-page short story. Like, when you have something worth my consideration, basically. So then, a couple of years passed, and I decided to expand that short story into something bigger. And when I did that, there was kind of a chain of introductions that happened from her that led me to this freelance editor who I hired to work on Warm Bodies with me. And then she's the one who actually kind of distributed it throughout the back channel of the industry. And it kind of just fell into the hands of a lot of different people at once, and one of which was my agent, and one of which was the producer who ended up making the movie. So it all happened, within weeks of me finishing that first draft. It was very bizarre.
Wow. So people obviously loved it and immediately saw the potential of it. And there's I don't know whether you're obviously a good writer, Isaac. I don't mean this to take away from that, but I'm also wondering about the element of timing that sometimes plays a part in this. Was it zeitgeist at the time? Because I guess it's a kind of rom-zom-com. Is that what you'd call it? The old Shaun of the Dead type genre?
That's what people sometimes call the movie. I think that it's a little unfair even to the movie, a little reductive, shall I say, because I think that the movie has a little more going on than a typical rom-com would claim to. But I definitely don't think of the book as a comedy. It has a lot of humor in it, but it's very dry, dark humor amidst a lot of pretty heavy themes. So the movie plays up the comedy quite a bit more. And lightens the tone a lot, but it's kind of a strange mix of tones and genres. I'm not really sure what the zeitgeist was at that moment as far as genres. I guess there was kind of a big wave of zombie stuff that came out in those couple years, which I was not aware of when I was writing the book. I was actually horrified to learn that because I had no idea that I was jumping on a bandwagon. But I don't know if it's sort of debatable whether it helped or hurt, because there was a lot of stuff already kind of in the pipe at that point. And I heard a lot when my agent was trying to sell it. There were a lot of people who were like, well, we already have 4 zombie things going on and we don't need another one. And so he had to kind of go above and beyond to explain to them, it's not really what you think. It's very different from the typical zombie concept. And so it's hard to say if it helped or hurt.
Yeah, I didn't mean to reduce your book to a genre.
It's not you. Everyone sums the movie up that way, and I don't think the movie has somewhat lower ambitions as far as like what the message is trying to get through it, and it plays up the comedy, it plays up the romance, and it's fair to call it a rom-com. I always cringe a little at the zom rom-com because it just I hate the sound of it. it's goofy,
Yeah,
but
okay. And
is what it
I think
is.
to be fair to Shaun of the Dead, there's a little bit more to Shaun of the Dead as well, isn't it? But it's still the
That's
way
true.
people sum it up.
Yeah. Yeah, there's kind of
Okay,
those comedies that have a vein of truth in them that that kind of blindsides you a little bit.
Sure. And on that note, that kind of theme, I mean, famously George Romero used zombies as a metaphor, and they are generally used as a metaphor for something. What meaning did you intend to put a sort of metaphor into the book, so a sort of deeper meaning?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was the reason that I wanted to write the books. It wasn't like I wanted to do a zombie book and then I came up with what it was about later. It was the reverse of that. I had some ideas and some themes I wanted to explore. Some of them are personal, coming from my own life, just kind of the experience of trying to find myself, figure out a sense of identity in a time of my life where I was sort of adrift, and also, on a larger scale, like sociologically, there, and just kind of philosophically on a human emotional level. To me, like the plague in this is not. I mean, it's not even just metaphorical. Like it literally is a spiritual condition in this story. There's no like biological virus at play. It's some kind of metaphysical thing that has happened to humanity, and it's sort of it's a lot of things, but at its core, I think it's sort of just giving up on life, the surrender to despair, and just going numb, basically, kind of an extreme manifestation of depression, you could call it, on a society-wide scale. There's a lot of different ways I could describe it, but that's a few.
Well, it's certainly a familiar story for well-written books and books that are well received. Is that it starts with a need to write the book rather than wanting to write the book and then looking around for the need. And it sounds to me like that driver was one of the reasons why the book was so good.
Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, I think that I would say I wrote it in spite of the genre, in spite of the trend, not because of it. It's actually been, a bigger problem, I think, than a help. But it just seemed like the right way to tell that story and the right way to explore those ideas. So.
Yeah, I think I read on the internet somewhere that the film made $100 million. I don't know how they quite quantify those figures, but it was a huge worldwide success. Now that must have been a slightly surreal experience for you.
Yeah, slightly. Yeah, that whole series of years was it's kind of a blur in my mind now. It feels like it was a dream sometimes, especially since it's remarkable how little it can actually change your life overall. When it passes, you kind of find yourself back in a similar place again, and it's like, wow, like doesn't what did that even happen? But there are of course changes. But yeah, that was to go from, I've been pushing for years to try to get something published, to get any level of success with my writing, and the most that I experienced at that point was like a mildly encouraging rejection letter from an agent. And so to go from that to suddenly, in the span of about a year, the book is published, there's a movie, I'm like walking the red carpet next to John Malkovich, and it's like, what is happening in my life right now? So yeah. Surreal doesn't even cover it, but yeah.
And that I mean, when you were writing it, trying to, as you say, going through perhaps a little bit of angst and trying to work out some things in your own life, and then suddenly have success thrust at you. I wonder if that was it an entirely healthy experience for you personally? Was it something that helped you develop, or was it a setback in some ways personally? I don't mean people shouldn't complain about success, I know, but I'm just trying to think about the personal journey that you made.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I don't feel like it harmed me psychologically or emotionally or anything. I mean, I was never going to be the kind of person that finds success and then goes on a wild ego trip to lose touch with reality. I've always been kind of like assume the worst. So when good things happen, I'm like, slow down. It's not going to last. Like, keep your cool. And that's kind of the approach that I took. So I never really, spun off into insanity, but it's hard to even imagine a negative from that process other than just, it presented challenges in my writing career. It very small relative to the benefits that it had, but there were certain things that it did, as far as just moving forward and writing more books and being kind of, typecast with the perception of, the rom-com, which is like, oh, you're the zombie guy. And like, will I ever not be the zombie guy? But that's more professional than personal. So for myself, it freed me up to write full time, which is really all I ever wanted. I never had huge ambitions for fame and wealth with writing. I always told everyone when I was working on it, like, if I can just afford to like buy a decent meal once in a while and not go work in these series of soul crushing jobs that I had at the time, that's all I'm asking for. So I got that, and I still have that for a little longer. We'll see how much longer it lasts. It's kind of running on fumes at this point. But yeah, it definitely did change my life on a fundamental level. It's it's hard to quantify it sometimes, but yeah.
Sure. Okay, well, we'll talk about the books and the way they're going in a moment. But I've got one more question about the film, because it's an interesting experience. And there's quite a few people who listen to this podcast have had adaptations or are in the process or hoping to. So that experience of handing your baby over at some point, because I think I'm right in saying the director wrote the screenplay, did he not?
Yeah.
His name has completely escaped me.
Jonathan Levine.
Jonathan Levine, thank you. He wrote the screenplay?
Yeah.
Okay, so he took your book, and this is, something, right? A lot of writers never have this experience of somebody taking their book and then writing a story version of it for a different medium. What was that like? Did you have any input in that at all, or did he refer his ideas to you?
I did have some input. I always explain it as kind of consultant level input. I didn't have any direct control over anything or like veto power, but they actually did come to me at multiple stages of the process and just kind of present to me what they were thinking, and then I could give my reaction, and they could take it or leave it. So throughout the whole thing, before they were writing the script, the producer, the one who kind of triggered the whole thing, stayed in pretty close contact with me and kind of checked in on me to what sort of some of their ideas for like how they were going to do some of the visuals and just how they were going to portray the world. And then when Jonathan started writing the script, first he came and like had lunch with me and talked about his ideas for it, and we discussed it at great length. And that was encouraging because I had no idea what they were going to try to do with it. I kind of assumed, since it was the studio that did Twilight, I just assumed they were going to try to replicate Twilight and make it another, teen romance thing. And I'm sure that was still in the equation, but talking to Jonathan was kind of like, oh, okay, like he actually likes the movies that I like and kind of wants to push it a little further in the direction of art. And so we had that conversation. Then like he would call me once in a while he was writing it and just ask me kind of simple questions like, what year is this? And what do you imagine the motivations for these people are, or something like that. And then I would kind of tell him what I thought, and he would just add it to the pot, basically. And so when he was done with the script, I got to read, I think, 2 drafts of it, and kind of just mark it up like you would any editing situation, and then send it back to them. But it was all kind of ultimately up to them. Like it was input, and I think they took some of it. Like some of the things I advised happened, but I don't know if it was me or 100 other people making it happen. But I was basically hanging around, was lurking and watching, and even on the set once in a while. Usually I kind of wanted to stay back and let them do their thing, because they authors are sort of infamous for being big divas up in the business of filmmakers, and they usually don't want them around for that reason. So I was conscious of that, but once in a while I would kind of step in and be like, what's going on there, and make a comment, and who knows if it was taken seriously or not. But I felt lucky to be invited on that level, because usually even pretty popular authors tend to get shoved off set, from what I hear. So yeah. I was nobody. My book hadn't even come out yet.
Yeah, that definitely happens sometimes, and sometimes authors are not a good influence on the other medium version of their story, I think. And I think you do the right thing to take a step back, just a couple of observations about maybe where the story was coming from. But it is a different beast, isn't it? And it's kind of like leaving it to the experts. It's what they do.
And I understand that. I mean, I'm a big fan of film too, and yeah, I've written some scripts, and like I've wanted to direct something, never have, but I kind of I get it on what they're trying to do. And so I was never looking at it like you're going to make an exact literal translation of my story. I understand that's not possible. And so I was very conscious of like, you guys know what the big vision here is, you know, like how this film's going to be pitched and what you imagine the audience to be. So like, do your thing. And I'm just kind of looking for moments that could improve whatever that thing is.
Now, so after the adaptation, was it always in your mind to turn Warm Bodies into a series, or without the film adaptation and the huge success the first book had, were you thinking about doing something else at that point?
Well, I always wanted to do it as a series. I didn't actually think that that was going to be an option when I wrote it. I mean, it ends the book in particular ends very openly. I mean, it literally says we're just getting started, kind of on the last page, and there's a lot of unanswered questions and a lot of kind of work to be done before the world is saved, because it's far from rosy at the point that it ends. But I mean, this was my first published book. It was kind of a long shot in a lot of ways because it's a pretty far out there concept. I didn't really know how people were going to receive it, if anyone would be able to swallow the whole, fall in love with a rotting corpse thing, and just didn't know if it was going to work, basically. And so it wasn't on my mind to approach publishers who were like, here's my 4-part epic saga about zombies, finding the meaning of life. Like, that was just too far for me at the time. And so in my mind, like, I chose to end the story here, knowing most of the stuff that was going to happen after that, but I didn't think I would actually, write the rest of that story because of just the position I was in, and I just didn't think there would be a demand for it. And then, yeah, when people actually responded to the book, and like, not even just that it sold a lot of copies, but the fact that people were reading it, at least a lot of people were reading it kind of in the way that I intended, as far as like taking it seriously and actually getting involved with the ideas and the characters, and like not just treating it as a joke, then I was like, maybe I should write the rest of it, because there's a lot of really interesting territory to cover here that barely scratched the surface of it in Warm Bodies, as far as the world that they live in, and kind of what kind of a reality this is where zombies are real, because it's kind of it's a little different than the usual zombie scenario, in that like it's not like where rotting corpses appear and people are like, what is happening? Why are corpses coming back? Like, they've seen zombie movies, they know what zombies are, and so it's very mysterious that fiction is coming to life, basically. And so there's kind of an element of that that's hinted at in Warm Bodies, but the world that they live in is much weirder and more kind of surreal than it appears in Warm Bodies. So I wanted to expand that and kind of see what else is out there beyond the little scope of their enclave. And so, yeah, when people seemed interested in that, I was like, okay, let's do this.
And your publisher was still on board at that point, so your second book in the series was traditionally published as well? Yeah,
the second book was a prequel, and it was a novella, so it wasn't really a major release. They did eventually publish that one. It had a very convoluted route. It started out as an ebook only on this kind of obscure startup platform that my agent created, and then it was published in the UK as a paperback, and then a year later it finally came out with my US publisher. So it was very strange. Like, they weren't too keen on publishing a novella or a prequel. Both of those things are market suicide. But I felt like it was the thing that I needed to do next, and so I released that. And then The Burning World was the actual sequel, the actual continuation of the story, and they were on board for that. I think there was, it had been several years by that point, and there was some concern that, people would have lost interest by now, but there were still high hopes, and so they did that. And there's a whole other topic there as far as the aftermath of that.
So the publishing company, there's sometimes a tension between the writer and the publisher. And what would they like ideally you to have done at that point? Did they want you to go more down the film treatment route? Did they think that was more commercially viable?
Honestly, I guess for better or worse, my publisher was never particularly involved creatively. I've heard stories about people's publishers kind of interfering in sort of in the way that movie studios are famous for doing, creatively, suggesting what you have to do. I don't know how common that is with books, and my experience has been mostly they'll make edits, they'll suggest things that they think could be different, but ultimately it's up to me because I'm the one writing it. And I guess if they really hated what I was doing, they could have just refused to publish it. But never really had a conflict like that. They would, of course, would have liked me to publish it a lot sooner. That was the big issue, was like, it's taking a long time, and the heat is cooling off, and I was aware of that, but like, it was a much bigger, much more ambitious book that I was doing, and it wasn't going to be the 9-month breeze that Warm Bodies was. So, I mean, the movie, I don't even know what it would mean to follow the movie more closely. I mean, the movie ends where the book ends, and there wasn't anything else movie-wise produced, so it was kind of up to me to figure out where that would go. And I actually did. I mean, Burning World in particular is much more cinematic than Warm Bodies. I mean, there's a lot of action in there. There's car chases and plane crashes and gunfights, and it's very, very intense, even though it's also like a lot more psychologically heavy. But I think some people would have seen that as pursuing the Hollywood route. But ultimately, it's probably still not as commercial as Warm Bodies was, just because it's denser. But my publisher never really, they never really got involved on that level. They never came to me and said, like, we think you should do this. They're just kind of waiting for my call. And when I said, hey, I'm going to do another book, they're like, okay, cool. And they were very passive about the whole thing.
Okay. And you're to the point now. How many books in the Warm Bodies series now?
4. And it's
4.
It's over now. This is the living is the end. Absolutely.
Okay. And the book now. So were all 4 of those published? Trad published?
The first 3 were. So
Okay.
I'm just going to call them all books. I mean, some people don't count a novella or a prequel, but they're sequential stories in their own way. So yeah, there were 3 books that were published under Simon & Schuster on a few different imprints, but same people. And this is Living is my first foray back into the indie world.
And where are you with that? That's now out, I think, is it?
It's once again, it's an incredibly awkward, convoluted release with this one, where I set a release date for November 13th and wasn't able to get the books printed in that by then. So I went ahead and launched the ebook, which has been available since then. But the print edition is still being printed right now, and will come out in about a week. So it's kind of out, it's kind of not. A lot of people are waiting for the print to read it, and so I think roughly maybe 20% of my following has read it already, but then the holdouts are still waiting to report. So yeah, it doesn't really feel like it's out for me. I'm not really an ebook reader. I like to get the paper in front of me, and I think a lot of my readers feel similar. So it's kind of soft release, I guess.
You like the physical book in your hands. And how are you physically producing the book? Is it a POD, print on demand, or are you printing?
No, I mean, that was originally the plan. This whole release has been such a train wreck from top to bottom. It started out, from the moment that I decided I was going to do it myself. There were this very ambitious plans. My agent has a company called Zola Books, which is kind of a retailer of ebooks, and they have like a various methods of selling directly from your author site, which is what I've been doing for a long time. And he had kind of these big plans to have a deal with Ingram Spark, and we were going to have worldwide distribution, and it was going to be not POD, but like an actual publishing run through Ingram, and kind of this whole really cool sounding scenario where it's kind of get the best of both worlds. And then just bit by bit, this fell through, this delayed, this wasn't as good as it was supposed to be, and it just kind of ground its way down until at this point, it's basically right back to where I started, where I'm just having a print shop print a couple thousand copies and going to be selling them by hand, like hand stuffing envelopes and going to the post office. So I don't think that's the method I definitely didn't intend it to be this way. I didn't intend it to be this primitive. And I'm hoping to kind of expand it back into a more aggressive release next year. But it got to the point where like I was committed from the beginning, like it has to come out this year. I cannot stand to push it past New Year's into the next year where everyone kind of drops off the map in January. And I couldn't stand that thought, like it has to be now. And so the release date kept pushing further and further. And it just got to the point where, to do this right, to actually, make money and actually be able to sell books on a broader scale, it's going to take too long. And I just want it to come out now. Figure out the right way to do it next year.
Yeah, you can call this a soft launch and then go for the better planned one.
Yeah,
and
of course, it's a very small batch and very high quality hardcover book that's going to be very customized. It has all these cool little bits of artwork and maps and stamps and just like a lot of bells and whistles that are only possible because I'm using this small printer and kind of sending these out like this. So it'll be kind of a deluxe first edition, and then we'll get practical next year.
Yeah, so it might be KDP print on demand for everyone else next year. But obviously, there's an opportunity to pick up a collector's edition at the moment.
Yeah. There's only going to be 1,200 of them made, so we'll see what the next edition looks like.
And we should probably give a plug to your website at the moment. You mentioned a couple of times as a place where you can directly buy your books.
Yeah, so that's the only place you can buy them at this point is my website, which is isaacmarion.com. And you can get the ebook on Amazon and Kindle and wherever. But as far as the actual physical copies, it's only there. It's not going to be in stores. It's not going to be on Amazon for the foreseeable future anyway. So yeah, it's on there, and it's kind of above and beyond as far as a book release goes. When you buy it there, you get a free ebook included. It's as a immediate download. So if you wanted to read it now, you buy the hardcover. I'm kind of taking like the vinyl records approach, wwhere you buy a vinyl, you get a download code, and you get both, which is great because I probably wouldn't ever buy vinyl if I had to also go buy the MP3s on the side. So I'm trying that out. I'm not sure why that's not the norm already, but see how that works. And then, what's that?
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing. And I am an ebook reader. I love reading on my ebook, but I also like the physical book. And I think it's a trick missed by the industry at the moment is not to offer that
it's strange.
A chance for me to buy the physical book and get the ebook
at
the same time, or vice versa.
The same exact concept applies that applies with music, where people buy vinyl for the occasional times when they want to like really have like a sit down aesthetic experience with the album, where they want to see the artwork and sit in front of their turntable and just like zone out to it. But then there's also the times when you're on the bus and you just want to listen to some songs for a couple minutes, and those are both valid versions of the experience, I think. And I think it applies exactly to books, where there's times where you sit in your living room in front of the fire with a good book and you want to just really have that tactile experience. And then there's times when you're on an airplane and you just need to read it on your phone. And so
Yeah.
The concept is there and doesn't cost anything more to include the ebook. So like, why not?
Yeah, and the millennials looking can go onto Google to look up what a vinyl and a turntable is. We'll have to explain that. And I'm also going to say that Isaac is spelled ISAAC because I think I'm one of the people who often puts two S's and one A in it, and I'm not sure if that happens to lots of people, but it definitely happens to me with Isaac.
I
really. Oh, really? It's funny, isn't it? And even when I've seen the name quite a lot, I think I see the two S's. It's weird. Do some people spell it with two S's?
It's a huge mystery to me because as far as I know, no, it's not ever spelled that way. I mean, there are a lot of famous Isaacs throughout history. There's Isaac Asimov, Newton, Brock, various people that, and it's always two A's. I mean, in the Bible, Isaac of Abraham, and it's Isaac. There's never two S's, and yet I'd say probably 80% of people I meet default to two S's. So I don't know where they're getting it. It's out there.
No, it's weird, isn't it? I think I probably fall into that category. I do apologize. But yeah, isaacmarion.com.
It's a running joke for me at this point.
With two A's. Okay, so you're basically, in terms of self-publishing, I can see that you were taken down a certain route by your agent. For better or for worse, there was a grand plan in place and probably distracted you from what would have been a slightly more ordered plan just in the self-pubbing world. And you're now recovering a little bit to that launch. So, and this is important for you, Isaac. You said, you had that big breakout success, and it is difficult quite often for people to follow that up. But you need to cement this now to make this your career, because the last thing you want to be doing is going back to some 9-to-5 job, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is a very, very strange stage of my life right now because I don't know what's going to happen with the next book, if I'll be able to even make it that far without getting other employment. The self-publishing thing is far more valid now. Many people are making great careers out of it, and I'm intrigued by that. I do like the directness and the freedom of it, although the freedom is questionable because I've done nothing but work on this since I started it. So it's not exactly easier, but it's an experiment for me, and I don't know. I'm certainly not doing it right. I'm a subscriber to the SPF. I actually signed up for couple of the courses and kind of started to realize throughout the process that a lot of this stuff doesn't really apply to me in my current situation because I took such a off-brand route that the way that I'm doing it, it's just like, I can't really do this and I can't do that, and this part doesn't make sense for my situation. And so I kind of it's hard to find what the efficient way through is for me in this version of self-publishing. Maybe when I get past this first draft and if I keep doing it next year and kind of take it into the more mainstream way of self-publishing, then I'll be able to kind of get the gears turning smoothly again. But right now it's kind of just got to get through this.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously your slight problem at the moment is that you've got three books, which are traditionally published, and your percentage on those is not going to be the type of percentage that a self-publisher needs in order to turn a profit. So I guess the bottom line is that you need some more books. So what's on your mind? You say this is it for Warm Bodies. The living is the end. So what's next?
Well, I'm not 100% decided. I have roughly 3 fairly fleshed out ideas for my next 3 books, and I'm pretty sure the next one I'm going to do is actually an idea that I initially wrote in my early 20s. It was my third book, and wrote it back then, and then kind of I revisited it a couple years ago to see if maybe I could salvage it and edit it into functionality, but it was too far gone, and it just was a younger version of me that I'm not interested in anymore. But I still really like this concept of this story, and so I've been toying with the idea of kind of cannibalizing that story and rewriting it completely. And it's like all of my ideas moving forward, they're going to be nothing like Warm Bodies. They're not. None of them are any particular genre. They're certainly not realism in any traditional sense. But they're much more kind of grounded in reality with some kind of weird twist. So the next one, I haven't gotten deep enough into the concept to really like have an elevator pitch for it, certainly, but it's basically about a guy who keeps having a recurring dream. He meets this woman in this recurring dream, and he eventually kind of comes to realize that there's sort of this alternate reality that is inhabited by like the other halves of our personalities. The kind of the inner voice, basically, that you hear in your head is actually a person, and they live, in this dream space. And so he starts to visit this world, which is sort of just a mirror image of ours, but with different versions of ourselves in it, and kind of gradually loses interest in the world that his body lives in. And it's kind of about this tension between fantasy and reality, and like how trying to figure out his place in that spectrum, while also kind of the difference between the two halves of his personality and this woman's personality. So it's definitely not zombies, but also pretty weird.
No, I sense already that there won't be a zombie in sight.
Nope, not for a long time.
In these books,
I've learned my lesson,
forward.
honestly. With going into that realm, I never expected to encounter such an urgent need to like put things in boxes. And if you have any trace of a recognizable genre, people just go zoop, and it's there, and it's nothing but that. So like if there's a zombie walks across the street in the background at some point in your story, you're now a zombie novelist, and this is a zombie novel. If there's a teenager somewhere in the story, it's young adult. It's just like they want to shrink it down to the most simple concept they can find. And so I'm very wary of that now, because it's been frustrating to be kind of put in those boxes and sent to these conventions where I don't know what's going on. I'm not familiar with the genre because this or that. And so I'm looking forward to kind of writing something that's just has no baggage, just is what it is, and people can figure out how to categorize it, but it's not going to be obvious.
Yeah. Although the flip side of that, of course, it does make the marketing a little bit more tricky when you can't tick those boxes. I mean, literally tick those boxes when you're sort of uploading in terms of keywords and categories sometimes.
That's true. I'm not sure if I've struggled with that even with having a reliable tag like zombies, because I find that the majority of people who like these books don't like zombies. I hear all the time, almost every comment is like, I'm not really into zombies, but I thought I'd give this a try because it sounded interesting, and I really liked it. And it's the hardcore zombie fans are usually not that excited about the formula being messed with, because it's a very hyper specific genre. And so when it's tagged at that, and when it's marketed so heavily as as zombies something, or as young adult, or whatever people decide they want it to be, I'm not sure how that ends up benefiting me or hurting me in the long run, because if you mislead people, then the people who would like it won't ever find it, and the people who won't like it, or who think they'll like it, will read it and not like it. So I think it's important to market honestly, or else you're going to end up with the wrong readership.
Yes, it's a minefield in that particular sense. As you say, you stick one zombie in the background and you're a zombie author, then someone reads your book and says, there's not enough zombies in this book.
Yeah.
And there you go. Okay. Well, look, I'm interested in definitely would love to know how things go for you, particularly with your kind of relaunch of The Living next year, once you've got your hands more on the indie mechanisms. But I have to say, a quick glance at what you're doing, Isaac, seems to be pretty spot on. Your website's good. You've got I can see there's a mailing list going there. So how big's your mailing list now?
I think it's 2,000. I just kind of started this mailing list about less than a year ago. I had it kind of in the background of my website, but no one had really made me understand how important that was. Actually, the SPF thing was one of the people that really drove that home to me. Is like, I really need to be more aggressive with this list, because I hadn't really realized why it's so important, because I thought, well, like, I have Twitter, I have Facebook, like, people will find it. But then I started to notice, people aren't getting those posts anymore. I mean, the algorithm is so aggressive and so mysterious that I'm a tiny percentage of people who specifically ask to see my post will ever actually see them. So it's like email is kind of the only place left that's safe from the AI overlords that are controlling everyone's lives.
Yes, there's a novel there, isn't there, about that?
Yeah, exactly.
Those algorithms in our head.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Isaac, that's great. We've raced through our sort of 40-odd minutes, and that's it's been great to talk to you. And I think that one of the things that struck me when I did my modicum of research before the interview was the praise and the critical reception you got for your writing, which is outstanding. So, I mean, the fundamentals clearly are there. You're an exceptional writer. So, you know,
that's especially important for me right now, like to remind myself that people did like the books, because when I look at this career path and see, you know, how Burning World suddenly dropped off, it's when I try to explain it to people, I can hear in the back of my mind, like, it just sounds like I'm making excuses for writing a bad book that no one liked, and that's why it failed. But then I have to remind myself, no, like, people actually did like it. There's just other factors at play that are beyond my control. So thanks for reminding me.
No, it's my pleasure. And, you know, and one of the issues is in the traditional industry, you know, the contracts don't provide as much for the author as I think they should. I think that is going to be redressed in the long run, even in the traditional industry, because of the independent movement. But it would be nice to see authors you know, being able to sustain their career for a longer period of time, you know, as long as they want, based on their writing.
Nice.
So I think you've set a little bit of a challenge for yourself in terms of the genre switch, and the books being probably literary fiction might be, again, it's pigeonholing, but literary fiction at least is a description of, you know, a non sort of genre fiction book. But that's all surmountable, and you've got a loyal fan base to work with. So there are positives there for you. People know your name. A lot of people have read your books, and that's got to be something that you can leverage, as they say, when it comes to really launching the next series, I hope.
I hope so. That's kind of the thing that I'm clinging on to, is that even though the audience has shrunk immensely since Warm Bodies, there's the people who are still here are pretty hardcore, and I think that they, you know, especially when I do make the switch into other stuff, I'm going to be relying on that kind of word of mouth, hand selling thing that fans are doing to push through that transition, because I'm well aware that, you know, my next book is not going to be a huge blockbuster. It's not like it's going to go back to where it was before once I start a new story, because it's harder to, like you said, it's harder to market things that don't fit it neatly in boxes. And so, yeah, it's a challenge, but I'm kind of excited about that challenge, almost more so than the current one I'm in, because this one is like the story has been successful, and it's just had all these ups and downs, and I'm kind of just trying to reach the end of it, but it's very hard to market the end of a story. I mean, this is kind of the big problem that I face with even publishers, is there were a lot of other publishers that I shopped it around to afterwards who wanted to publish it, but they're like, we can't publish the fourth book in the series while having 3 books owned by someone else. We can't cross promote. We can't do giveaways. And like, it kind of handicaps you in that process. And so even psychologically, it's kind of like, I can't really talk a lot about this book because you kind of have to know the other books to get into it. So like doing some kind of viral marketing campaign or something, it's different. And so I'm really excited to start fresh and have like a new book with a new concept that doesn't have any tie-ins to anything else. And I can just be like, almost start over with my career, be a new writer with a new thing.
Oh, we certainly wish you the best with that, Isaac. And you're doing all of that and a fresh start in a new house, because I think I'm speaking to you from an island somewhere in the Pacific, I guess. Is it off the coast of Washington?
Orcas Island. It's
as in the killer whale, orcas.
Yeah, it's spelled that way. I'm not sure actually if it even refers to that, because it's not orcas plural. It's orcas. But yeah, same spelling, and it's a very small little island. I pretty much threw my whole life away about 2 months ago. I sold my house in Seattle and got this little log cabin out in the middle of nowhere. So I mean, I'm running on satellite internet here, hence the awkward delays and video problems. But I decided, writing is what I care about most, and yet somehow I'm spending a fraction of my time on it, and I don't care so much about like all the stuff that I'm doing in the city, going to parties and hanging out with people. And it's like, it's fun. I like fun. I'm not total workaholic, but the priorities are way off. And so like I decided I needed to take some drastic step to focus. So I'm out here in the middle of nowhere, no distractions, no options for fun. And I'm just going to like hopefully write a lot more, a lot faster.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my heart goes there because I think I'm probably one of a few people listening to this podcast who doesn't occasionally dream of a log cabin on an island just to be able to sit down and write without those distractions. But
the rich person model is you have your cabin in the woods and then you have your main home in the city. And I'm kind of trying to simulate that without being rich. I'm starting with the retreat, and then someday maybe I'll get an actual home. But for now, I'm just living in the retreat.
I think Karen Slaughter, we spoke to her at Thriller Fest. I think she does exactly that. I think she's got a cabin somewhere in the mountains and she does all her writing up there. But she sold a few books.
That'd be the ideal.
Well, let's hope next time we speak, you could be talking to us from your pad in the city on your weekend, which should be a nice thing. Isaac, thank you so much indeed for joining us, and I really appreciate it. We'd love to keep in touch and see how things develop for you in the next year, but I definitely want to wish you the very best of luck in cracking the self-publishing side of it and getting that writing career firmly established.
All right, well, thanks so much.
This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
There we go, Isaac Marion, Warm Bodies. So he got that great start, and there must have been that moment where you think, I've done it as a writer, I've cracked it as a writer, but it's a bit like being in a band, I guess, that difficult second album, that follow-up album. If you think of some of the great albums that have ever happened, the next album on is not always the one that stands out in the long line of albums that the group produces. Pink Floyd, good example. But how would you see that? I suppose if it happens to you now, Mark, it's a bit different. You've got how many, 25, 30 odd books, $1 million turnover every year. It's the right time for you to surf that wave. Isaac's in a slightly different place, isn't he?
Yes, coming out with the first book and then having lots of success does put you under a lot of pressure. I mean, it's not. There are lots of examples of authors who've done very well with first books and then have struggled to replicate that success because a number of reasons why. I mean, they may themselves get a real case of doubt, and they'll be concerned about meeting the expectations of readers who may have there may have been a rapturous response to the first book, and then there's pressure to repeat the trick, which can be very difficult to do. So it's a very nice position to be in. If you're going to pick a challenge or a problem, this would be a good one to pick.
He's a great writer, Isaac, and his website looks fantastic, and he's working hard at it now. And I think he's felt to me like he's on the cusp now of finding that place where he's going to be happy as a writer and also going to make it work commercially for him. So we'll follow closely with Isaac's story. But let's catch up with you, Anne Hollywood, big Hollywood mogul. Can you announce the name of this director I think you said is being courted at the moment?
I can't, no, but it's quite close now. They're dotting I's and crossing T's. I've had an email from my producer yesterday saying that the director they've gone after is ready to go, and once he has signed, they'll move on to try and find talent to there we go, James. Yeah, James is, for those who James is pretending to be James Bond, Basil de Bond, perhaps. Yes, so we're it's pushing on. So we'll see.
This is a female lead, isn't it?
It is a female lead.
A small tweak to the script, I reckon I'm in.
Yep. I can certainly see you as Beatrix. Because
it's time we had a leading trans hero. You should be.
Yes.
You're not an early adopter, though, are you? You're just second tranche. So maybe you'll do that next time.
What are you suggesting? That's a transition.
I don't know what your particular journey is.
I'm a bit hairy for that.
Yeah.
Don't mention the J word, or I'll hand you down and kill you. Anyway.
We should say we did, this is our second crack at this one because we had technical difficulty recording this podcast, and you went on a mini rant about the word enjoy.
I did.
Do you want to
yes.
rant about that again?
I'll rant very quickly. So we watched MasterChef last night, and Lucy watched it. I tolerated it, and one of the things I hate is when contestants have prepared their food and they take it to the critics who are going to comment on the food. They put they say, I've prepared you a plate of asparagus risotto with whatever jus they're serving at the moment, and they lay the plates down, stand back and say enjoy, and then leave the room. And it makes me want to hit people.
Yes.
People enjoy it.
But everybody falls into these traps. Any MasterChef dish has to have some celeriac puree on it, doesn't it? That's the thing.
It needs to be a jus or a puree. Yeah.
Celeriac puree only exists on MasterChef. Nobody in the real world is going to put celeriac puree on a decent plate of food. Anyway, I do like MasterChef, and I liked it last night. I was saying to you watch at the beginning, there was a knocking on 60-year-old guy who'd been watching it over the years and worked out that he could be a contestant. Like me. And then there was this young girl who looked about 12 to me, but I'm getting older, who was actually 21. And you thought, well,
kids these days.
And of course, brilliantly, counterintuitively, the old guy was useless and produced this plate of food that, basically I could have produced. And the young woman who was 21 was amazing. And by the end of the episode, you realise they found a contender. She's fantastic. So really, and I like that. And this sounds like I'm shoehorning it in, but that is what we write about. We write about confounding expectations and how people constantly surprise you, and everyone's got a story. And that's why, as writers, I sit there, I'm in the middle of writing. Almost everything I watch, I do think about the story, the narrative, how it unfolds. Either there's a TV advert, an episode of The Orville or whatever, think how's that worked, where they're going with this, and liked it, picked faults in it and whatever.
Yeah. So yes, that's they all go on journeys, and then they tell people to enjoy, and I hate them all. My
grammar thing, and I'm now officially completely fed up with it. I listen to the Today program, it's the morning news program on the radio, and whenever they have an academic on, whenever they have someone from a university, they start every sentence with "so." I mean, it just seems to be a universal thing in universities. So you say to an academic, so population increase. A few years ago, we thought it was going to be terrible for the world. It's now leveling off. Exactly. And so they'll go, so we started looking at this. And like, what did the word...
There's lots of that. Verbal tics like, let me tell you. That's another one.
Yeah.
The politicians these days will go, let me tell you. Well, that's almost like it's kind of a verbal
like a comma
contrivance to give you another half second of thinking time.
Yeah.
And footballers, so the kind of the less educated version is, Yeah. You listen to a footballer interview these days, it'd be like,
Of course, my children use like as a comma in their sentences, but that's quite an American Valley Girl thing, isn't it?
Yes, okay. It is. God, we sound really
Two
old.
Old men ranting about the way young people speak. That's what this podcast is all about. We could do a whole separate podcast show on that. Brilliant. Thank you so much indeed to our guest, Isaac Marion, for joining us, and from the isolation of an island. It sounds very nice off the west coast of the United States. Mark, thank you for joining us. We're going to do an update on my book next week again, which is quite exciting, and no movie deal yet. And
is it finished?
No book yet.
No book. Okay.
You have to wait for the update.
Spoiler alert.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the process, the author accelerator process. I can tell you how much money I've paid, what service I'm getting out of it, and whether I think it's been worth it or not. We'll talk about that next week. We also have an interview with a writer from New Zealand who is a subgenre of a subgenre person who understands particularly the fantasy broad genre very well, sees these subgenres popping up all over the place, and writes into them commercially successfully. So really interesting interview from that point of view. So that's all to come next week. Until then, I'm going to say have a great week. I'm going to say goodbye.
It's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Goodbye.
Ta-da.
We have to say goodbye together at the end.
Okay, yes.
We'll rehearse that for next time.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Get show notes, the podcast archive, and free resources to boost your writing career at selfpublishingshow.com. Join our thriving Facebook group at selfpublishingshow.com/Facebook. Support the show at patreon.com/selfpublishingshow. And join us next week for more help and inspiration so that you can make your mark as a successful indie author. Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with The Self-Publishing Show.